Hello Stranger Things fans, Bored now, back with you. On this video I will be talking about the season 4 finale of Stranger Things. So Stranger Things 4 chapter 9, the episode is called The Piggyback, and full spoilers from the start of the review as always. So we had this big dramatic epic 2 hours 20 minutes finale, and I have to say it went by pretty quickly. I am absolutely drained having seen it earlier tonight. It really delivered the big Stranger Things type moments. It was very tense at times, very emotional. You had some great character beats, and obviously so much crammed into that episode. So really I'm just going to go through it and just pick out some of the highlights, some of the big bits which sort of stand out to me, and discuss them, because that's the only way I can do it. Like, there's too much to really try and do it in any major sort of order, but it is the episode where it cuts between a lot of different stuff, a lot of different locations, and it does it really well, and it brings everything together very sort of smoothly. A lot to keep track on, obviously. So I'll start with obviously Nancy and her plan and the way she's raring the troops to go into the house, because it is sort of funny and it's quite cool. And she has taken on this mantle of the leader almost, where it's her sort of calling the shots or coming up with this plan, and it's this well engineered plan where everyone seems to have a set role, which I really like, because that's a big part of Stranger Things. It's about the gang, everyone chipping in, everyone doing something different, and it just gives you some nice sort of stuff flitting between the group really. But I'll say also that Nancy, I got a bit of Ellen Ripley vibes of her in that scene, the way she was being very commanding, very confident, the leader of the group. Just the way she was dressed as well. I don't know if that was intentional. It wouldn't surprise me with this show, but I did get very strong Ripley vibes from her. So that they obviously go in, and everyone has their set role. For example, Erica, they send her to cause a distraction, to distract Vecna at one point, and also to give the signal to, or when she gets the signal, from Lucas, because Lucas goes in the house with Max. When Erica gets that signal, then she tells the Nancy group, and they can go in, and it's this really cool sort of well laid out plan where it's sort of 4 phases, as they say, and it means you can follow it, and it means there are certain almost sections and chapters of it which you can follow. So it's all very nicely. They all have different sort of roles. One thing that happens with Dustin and Eddie, which is really nice, is at one point they build this fort, but it comes back to Eddie's music, him obviously being into quite sort of heavy metal or thrash metal, whatever you want to say. And it obviously once again comes back to the importance of music in the show, but also the season, because what they do is they get this massive speaker, and Eddie just riffs on it and plays some major guitar riffs, and I think it's meant to be a Metallica song playing. It did sound like Metallica, and I can believe they were around in the 80s, because I know they've been going quite a few years now, but I think it might have been one of theirs. If not, it was a similar sounding band, but they use that to sucker the big bat creatures out, so they get drawn away from the house. They don't go to help Vecna in the house. They're actually drawn away to there, and that's really cool. I really love him and Dustin revving up and bouncing off each other, and obviously, as I said, Eddie's a character that's grown on me. But ultimately his sacrifice in this is really dramatic, because the bats come after them, and they go through the upside down. We see this once again. There's actually one of the fun scenes early on is like the whole group like flopping through the upside down, and just this great visual of them going, and the flip sort of reverse image, and it's sort of funny with Dustin like landing like on a thud, and like him then having to be like dragged back up. But when him and Eddie are supposed to leave through the upside down later, Eddie decides not to do it. He decides to be a hero, and he doesn't go through. He like cuts off the like essentially the rope, and like shuts off the entrance, and he then grabs a bike and like cycles away, and he screams at the bat things, and the bat things come after him. So it's this big sort of using himself as bait, and you can see Dustin's very upset. And ultimately, I mean, I'll get more into the meat of what's going on with all the characters, because all the major characters are put in danger in this across different locations, which I really like. I really like the importance of it. But Eddie is like ultimately killed, and it's, you know, like they catch up with him, they ravish him, and Dustin obviously isn't gonna let him like go that easily, because he comes after him, like he comes back out and like chases after him, but it's sort of too late when he gets there, and yeah, Eddie is like sacrificed, and that's sort of crucial later, because it means they do have the fourth victim, which they said Vecna needed the 4 victims to like set off like essentially the apocalypse and the end of the world. So yeah, it's dramatic stuff, it's emotional stuff with like Eddie and Dustin, and obviously they have built up this friendship. I don't know if we've seen that much of it on screen, and you know, Eddie is a new character, so his death probably doesn't mean as much as like if it was like a big cast member, but you know, he has had this nice little arc over the season where he has learned to be a bit more brave and you know, put himself out there, and he obviously has this personality and has struck up the bond with Dustin, and there's been this whole thing about like him looking out for him and Mike, like he was the only person to do it when they first like graduated and went to this higher school type. So there has been a nice little arc for Eddie, and that moment definitely lands. But as I said, we're getting this stuff happening from different locations. There's a bit more Stancy, of course, in this episode, which is very sort of nice. Steve, which I predicted anyway. I got the impression he was talking about Nancy, but like he says to her at one point, then the bit he left out of his dream was then it was she was actually there, and I think you can see the Nancy's a bit awkward, because obviously she's thinking of, I am in a relationship with Jonathan, but then they do have a moment before like Robin interrupts at them, but there's lots of nice little moments with the characters like that. There's a good moment where that trio, like Steve, Robin and Nancy, enter the house, and you've just got all the tentacles there like sort of blocking their path, and Steve is being a little bit of like the wimp, you know, tiptoeing through, but I do like Nancy like supporting Robin and holding her hand, saying, you know, it's all right, you've got this, like giving her that positive type energy. And that's obviously been another good surprise this season, like the chemistry between those two and how their friendship has sort of like blossomed, and I really like the vibe between the three of them. So there's some great character stuff going on throughout all this. But so to talk about the 3 locations, because you've got obviously Hopper, Joyce, Murray, etc. in Russia, and they're sort of at the start of the episode where Yuri's trying to like convince them that he can fly the helicopter, and he's trying to get it all revved up, and there's a really funny scene actually where he's like sort of getting like all excited over the sound it's making, and of course it's named after his like ex-girlfriend, his first sort of true love, and he's trying to convince them, no, you hear that sound, that's a positive sound, and they're like, no, that's the sound of it not working, and obviously they don't trust him, and they're still struggling, they're still waiting for like the collect call type thing. And they eventually talk to like someone from the government, and it's the woman we've seen who like knows Owen, and like I don't think we actually see the conversation, but it's said later by Dimitrov, I think, takes the call, and it like they speak in code, and the code is then Owens is off on assignment, and he's with the girl. And the girl meaning 11, and it's made clear that they're obviously doing this big like project, like trying to save the world, and obviously Joyce cottons onto once again her kids are in danger, her kids are in jeopardy, and they have to find a way to either get back to America or to do something, and they decide that time is of the essence and something big is going to go down tonight, and that's nice sort of linked to what's happening with the Mike group, like in Nevada or wherever they are at this point, traveling across the state, because they too realise that they're not going to get to Hawkins in time, so that they have to like come up with a plan themselves. So if you sort of talk about these two groups, you have the Hopper group, who decide then their plan is to like kill the demigods, demidogs, to cut off the source. Like Hopper says, if we kill the host type thing, then that will then weaken the monster in Hawkins and give the kids like a fighting chance. And obviously the whole snag in that plan is they have to go back to the base, the base that they've just been to. And obviously people like Dimitrov is like, are you crazy? Murray especially is like, are you crazy? But this is when we get full-blown Hopper with him like loading up with like the flamethrower and just getting ready to go to battle. There's a very sweet moment with him and Joyce. They actually get their first proper kiss in this. I really laughed at Joyce wearing the Hulk Hogan t-shirt, because they just had to find whatever clothes they could to change into, and you get like a really beautiful intimate scene with the two of them where they're just getting changed, and it's the first time they've been able to change into like proper clothes again, and there's just something very tender and intimate about it, where Hopper like has all these scars on his body from all these months, and Joyce just at one point takes a look over and is like worried about him, but there's just something very like effective about the way they shoot that scene, and they do have their first kiss, and obviously it's quite passionate, and they agree that when they get back they will actually have a proper date. But they're sort of interrupted by the telephone, which is obviously the call from the States, the collect call. So that's, pretty funny. But they do actually have a moment. But then there's a moment later, because there's a lot of different like flashbacks in this episode and things that are like used from previous seasons or previous episodes. And one is when Joyce has like visions of what happened with Bob in season 2, and this is relevant because of course the demidogs, because all this stuff being brought together in a nice little package, and yeah, she's just worried about Hopper, and Hopper says, because his plan is to like use himself as bait to like draw them out, and Hopper says then this time it's gonna be different, and he's like, I'm not going to die, and she's like, I hope it'll be different because I'm not going to another funeral, which is like a really tender moment. And they obviously go back in, and they have to go through the sewer again, and the place is pretty much deserted just because the monsters have basically taken over and killed a bunch of people. And also, I think the idea is then the Russian army are out like looking for them, and they just realised then the shadow demons have like taken over things, so have gone into like the host type things, the monsters. So that means big trouble, and that's when they cook this plan. So that's their plan on that side in Russia. And then the plan with like the Mike type group now is because they realise that they're not going to get there in time to Hawkins, and that is the Nell will actually like mind port into Max's mind, and then she can fight Vecna from that point of view. And once again we get flashes back to previous things, like the way she did with her mum, the way she did with Billy also in season 3, and that's the big plan. And we get, you know, some comedy stuff with Argyle because she needs a lot of ice basically, and so they go to like the fridge, like they go to like a pizza place, and like Jonathan bribes a guy into like giving up the place, so gives him some pot type thing and whatever, stoner type humour. Not always my sort of thing, but anyway, like they bribe him and they get the place, and you get some decent character stuff back and forth. You get some good stuff with Mike and Al. You get like stuff where Eleven is introduced to pineapple pizza and absolutely loves it, and I sort of wonder if that might have been a novelty thing back in like the 80s, like pineapples on the people, because Mike is like rolling his eyes and he's like, really? And that's just a thing. But also there's quite a nice little scene with Jonathan and Will, where Jonathan just says, I'm sorry for not being around, not being available this past year. You know, I've been off being stoned, I've had obviously things going on with Nancy, and it's just a nice little moment of them coming back together. But yeah, you have these two plans. You have obviously, you know, Al has this plan to mind port into Max so she can defeat Vecna and save them that way. And by the same thing, in Russia, they have a plan to weaken the whole thing by taking out the mind for, well, the demon dogs and the big sort of demon dog. So it's coming between these things, and there's several scenes where you have them cut between different sort of scenes, and like at one point it cuts between like the pizza place and them sort of loading up the ice, and it's another, I think it might be the Dustin Eddie type thing. But when things start to get really intense and things start to happen in like the first or second phase, I think you get a lot of cutting between different characters and different things, and shit just going down, and it's very like very exciting, very sort of frantic, but really well done. And certainly one of the big set pieces is when Eddie's like playing the music, like riffing on the guitar, and it's cutting between like the Nancy group as they're trying to fight off these creatures and the tentacles, and obviously stuff going on with like Erica and people like that as well. But so one of the major things is obviously with Max and Lucas, and there's this nice slow build, some good suspense and horror where Max is trying to draw Vecna out, and once again you get this really beautiful, intimate sort of moment with Max in this series, in this scene where she actually confesses to Vecna. First of all, I like how she's like getting passionate and trying to draw him out, and she turns the music off. She's like, hey arsehole, where are you? I'm waiting for you, come and get me, that sort of thing. But then she just has this emotional type scene where she's sitting down and she's confessing to Vecna. She's confessing, then you were actually telling the truth. I did want Billy dead. He made my life a living hell, and I just wanted it to be over with. I wanted rid of him, And it's this really cathartic type moment. Once again, the acting is very good by Sadie Sink. It's very sort of raw, and a great moment for the character just to have that personal type moment. It's also very unsettling because she starts talking about she had like these dreams at night about someone taking her, about her life being like put to an end. And it once again comes back around to Stranger Things 4 has been dealing with like mental health issues, and that's been a big part of the Max story this season, which is a great thing for them to deal with, especially now we're looking at it being such a modern thing, problems with mental health. And it obviously makes a lot of sense when you've been through what Max has been through in season 3 for them to like follow it up like that. But it's actually quite a dark sort of like moment, her saying she did want to be taken away. She dreamt that night of someone coming and taking her. And it's an interesting moment. She seems to be giving herself up to Vecna. She seems to be saying, come and take me. I want you to take me. Now, it could be part of like a strategy to like trick him type thing, but she does seem really serious. And then suddenly Lucas like breaks into the conversation, and this is just perfect. Now, as soon as he started talking in like quite a hostile way towards Max, I figured out then he was going to be like Vecna. Like Vecna had sort of not like literally taken him like over, because Lucas is like still in the room. He's still Lucas, but like Vecna has taken over like a visual of Lucas in Max's mind. So like Lucas suddenly starts asking things like, well, and he's judgmental, saying it's pretty weird to have those sort of feelings. Have you ever had those feelings about me? And he just starts turning all sort of hostile, and it throws Max off. And obviously she's suddenly under the furor of Vecna and doesn't know that it's not really Lucas doing it. And yeah, she like takes a shot at Lucas, get away from me sort of thing. And the whole thing starts, and it's worth saying the back and forth with Lucas. This is a really good like episode for Lucas. I think he's had a strong season like overall, but the stuff then with him and that jackass Jason who shows up, like they figured out where all this is going down. Like he bursts into the house, and it's cutting back and forth. Obviously there's a lot of stuff going on because we get like a memory within a memory, because Max is obviously doing her thing of trying to remember like a happy time. And we see first of all like a memory of her as a youngster at a skate park, and then we get the big sort of memory, which is her experiences with the gang, with Lucas in Hawkins, and particularly the dance from the end of season 2. So like the dance where she and Lucas kind of got together and the whole thing. But you get like the setting for that, and Elle can actually see into that. Elle can see what Max is seeing, so it's this really clever sort of thing. And you get like the hall at like the snowball dance, and like as I said, memory within the memory, and they're in the hall. And one detail I noticed about this was then it was like the song "Dream Another Dream," which is playing in the thing. And that, from what I can remember, was actually like the song playing in the 50s, like the first song when the victim was taken. So that's like a deliberate touch, which I really like. But all this stuff is going on, and in the memory, Max is like confronted by Vecna. But as I said, there's all this stuff going on with Lucas on the outside, where Jason comes in. He tries to get to Max. He wants her to come out of the trance. Lucas like confronts him, says no, we can't do that, and then Jason holds him up with a gun and says, if you don't get her out of that, whatever it is, that trance, then I'm gonna kill you. And Lucas just stands up to him and says, no, you can't do that. If she comes out too early, we're all gonna die. And he's like, well, you're just gonna die if you don't get her out. And Lucas doesn't budge. Lucas isn't gonna go, and he tries to talk him down. I guess he does like the only thing he can, which is he tells like Jason the truth about what's going on and why they're there. And what I like about this part of the episode is, which is so perfect and so believable, is then that idiot Jason like seems to be believing the story, like the basis of the story, but of course he still doesn't want to believe then it's anyone else's fault. He still wants to play up the whole, it was Eddie's in a cult, you're in the cult, like the whole hellfire thing. And he believes like the basis of the story, but he still has this idea that it's because of them they're in a cult, and they're the ones who have summoned, people from hell, basically, like the demons. Like he doesn't want to believe then it's any other like explanation. So of course he's still being an arsehole, he's still being very cynical, and at the same time on the outside of the house they've cut off like another member of the Tigers has grabbed at Erica. And this one bit I really like, which goes back to when you had like in the first episode of this season where you had like cuts between Lucas and Erica, and a nice sort of synchronicity is you get Erica who like fights back and escapes, and at the same time Lucas is just fighting with Jason, and he sort of pounds the living crap out of him. Like he really goes for it, and he's like heroic in the whole thing, and eventually later on when things develop further, Jason is like just mowed through where this hellfire opens up later on, and this like sort of, well, I say hellmouth, but the sort of upside down sort of cut just cuts straight through Jason, and that's really satisfying. He like the arsehole gets the end which he deserves, so I can't complain about that. But we get into the meat of like the Max and the L stuff, and Elle being in the memory with Max and confronting Vecna, because it's just at the moment that Vecna's about to take Max and kill her, where Elle pops up and uses her powers to like fire him back, and we start getting this big standoff, this big fat battle where Vecna is like throwing stuff at Elle and using his powers to like throw her about. At one point Max tries to save her, but he just like throws her to the side, and you get this stuff where Vecna, that is like propels Elle onto the outside, so you almost have like the inside of the house, but then this sort of I don't know I think I've described it as just the gates of hell, but just like the area like near the gates sort of thing, which is more like in the fantasy type world or in the netherworld type thing. And he puts Elle on the outside, and he like ties her up with the tentacles, and he says, before I kill you, I just want you to watch. And once again, this is where things are cranking up, and all the different friends are in danger, which becomes important, and that includes in Russia with Hopper in danger as well, and it all sort of cuts around this. But Elle tries to like talk Henry / Vecna around, because she says to him, hey, Popper's dead, and I know it was Popper's fault. He turned you into this monster. And she tries to convince him then, you don't have to do this stuff anymore. and then Vecna gives her this speech, then Popper wasn't the monster. He was just this ordinary guy, and that's why he craved the power and craved trying to help, like, people with us with special sort of abilities and powers to make himself extraordinary. But he's not the one who turned me into this like monster. And he sort of, like, in a way sort of blames it on Al because of what she did and her type powers. And once again, there's some really good, like, monologuing, some really good, like, backstory and explanation from, like, the Vecna type thing, which I'm just loving. I just love all of that stuff. And he gives this, like, explanation where after Al sent him into the Upside Down originally all those years ago, then he didn't just go to Purgatory. He went to another place, and we see him, like, walking and coming across the shadow monsters, essentially. So he says to Al, I discovered a way to, like, sort of transcend human existence where I could, like, travel back and forth and be, like, a combination and still live type thing. And so once again, all this mythology stuff is being built and paid off on from other seasons, because Al says, oh, you know, it was you all along. And it's worth saying this doesn't, like, totally exonerate, like, obviously Popper, as they call him, Branagh, because he did do some messed up shit and went about things the wrong way at times. But obviously it means then he wasn't completely responsible about the way Henry went and turned him into the monster. But yeah, Vecna is talking about this whole thing where there's almost like this duality type thing where it's like him and Al almost like dual, like, identities of themselves. And he's sort of saying about how he used Al's powers, and I think obviously we're meant to think that no, this is just him being, like, a villain, like, monologuing. But, like, there obviously is certain, like, things to this reveal and stuff. But it's a big moment anyway for Al where she realizes, yeah, it was you all along. And look, I think he's mentioned this before, but his whole plan was basically to work with Al, and they could sort of rule the world together. But obviously Al decided not to go down that path, and so he's basically saying, no, I've given up on that plan. I'm just going to kill you now. But the plan is that she has to watch all her friends die, and they're all in trouble, as I said, in the various locations. But eventually, and because he goes back to Max, and Max is, like, under his furor again, and she's in real danger, and the stakes of this and the way it's sold is so brilliant, so sort of tense. She's, like, up in the air, she's in a lot of danger. Like, he's grabbed onto her, you see the tentacles, and as I said, it cuts around the other characters and they're all in danger. Obviously, as I've already said, Eddie is sort of killed, which is important because he's, like, the fourth death. But, like, Steve, Nancy, Robin are all in danger. You've got Hopper in danger. I think even Dustin's in danger at one point. You've got Erica trying to get in frantically. At one point, Billy is used again because Billy appears to Max. I think that was earlier, but, like, the vision of Billy, and that's quite a good scene. Like, Max having to, like, shut him out type thing. Like, he's literally shut out on the other side of the door. So there's lots of, like, obstacles going on in this house and this section. But in the end, Al sort of recovers, and she, like, uses, as I said, the memory. Like, she uses a memory of her own to, like, overcome all this. And she essentially, like, fights back and helps Max. And what I like about this whole section is that it sort of comes back to the theme of, like, friendship and them as, like, a group. And that's one of the big themes of Stranger Things. And obviously it's about the spirit of them and the friendship. Sort of, it's always had like this positivity, and about how that's sort of ultimately gonna triumph and like defeat the evil. Now, as we find out, that the evil isn't quite defeated yet. But nonetheless, it's a big moment because Vecna says, "You've already lost," type thing, and now says, "No, you have," and sort of like throws him back in, basically into hell type thing. But then obviously it's not over, and the catch, as I said, is then the fourth person has been killed. So in some ways, what Vecna says is right. It is sort of too late, although maybe not in the grand scheme. But the fact that he's taken the fourth victim with Eddie means that this sort of apocalypse now can happen. It sort of starts spreading it across Hawkins, and that's where you see like the hellfire and the upside down opening up and ripping through the house and then ripping through Hawkins. You see it like going across the town, and very apocalyptic. And it's this stuff which really changes like the course of things moving into like the fifth and final season. But once again, there's so much stakes, but it's important than they're now taking this action and sort of defeating Vecna for finally, at least for now. Then it does save a friend. Like, it does lead to her friends like fighting back. Like, you see Hopper fighting back and killing killing the big mind flare demon or demon dog. I always get them confused, but finally like slicing it to death. And there's some great action in the Russian like part. There's some great stuff with Murray where he goes full on with the flamethrower and he's screaming as he kills the thing. And once again, the direction from the Duffer Brothers is really on point. The way it's linking these scenes up so well, because you have like the Nancy Steve Robin as their, because they finally defeat Vecna, because there's a literal Vecna that appears to them, and then there's the Vecna which is appearing in the minds of like Max and Al. So like Vecna is like tied up, and then they see like the literal sort of Vecna, so they then start tossing like the sort of bombs, if you like, or like whatever you call it, like the bottles with the fire in. And I like how fired up Nancy is, and her look of determination, and that she gets the final like blow that takes him out. But also this is cut between like the Russia stuff with Hopper taking charge and like killing the thing. And so all this is so well put, so nicely put together, and so effective and so epic. And you also get like Yuri comes through in the end, like the helicopter. He's got the damn thing to work, and he shows up just as they've killed the monsters. And one little like small touch I liked in the Yuri thing is, at one point Dimitrov convinces him then this is important because, you know, because he's like, why should I trust the Americans? And he says it's not just about that, it's about there is this thing out there in the world, and once it's come after people and killed people in Hawkins or in America, it will come after us here in Russia, so it has to be taken out. And I do like the like Dimitrov starts talking about Yuri as, I've heard about your past, as like this hero type figure, and he sort of plays on like that and his ego to sort of give him like a sort of a G up. And I do like that, how like Yuri the sort of like like unscrupulous son of a gun he tends to be does still have this in his past, and he does have like this sort of redemptive little arc and like little moment where he like arrives with the helicopter, and it's sort of all quite triumphant. Another thing I like with the Steve Nancy stuff is I forgot to mention this. I said I would be jumping about, but yeah, Steve actually saying to her thank you for like a few years back giving me like a sort of a bump, a kick in the teeth almost, and it's like he sort of has this regret where I don't know if it was a different time, then things might have worked out with you type thing, but just thanks her for giving him like a bump and a kick up the backside than he needed. And I think although there's certain things in that storyline which is questionable, which certainly Rachel would throw red flags at, I think there is a certain amount of like logic to that, but it's obviously another moment between them, and once again, really strong Stancy vibes, even though I ship Robin and Nancy. But yeah. Anyway, like getting into the heart once again, there is once again stakes on this because Max doesn't come out of the thing straight away. Like she collapses, Lucas is right there, and once again you have this amazing visual because you've got Lucas like clutching Max in his arms, and then Elle right there as well, getting all emotional, like she's there obviously through the mind port, and there's certain things where she's like reacting to this stuff and shaking up, and Mike has to like try and get through to her. That's a beautiful moment where Mike does, with encouragement from Will once again, Mike gives her a speech, says how he loved her, says how like she changed his life that day in the woods when they found each other, and just says things like you are a superhero and we're meant to be together, you changed my life, all this sort of stuff. It's a beautiful type speech and actually impacts on how Elle and brings her back around. But yeah, Max doesn't come out of the thing, and she's like shaking up, and they call like an ambulance, but her sight has gone, like something's happened with her eyes where she seems to have lost her sight, and she's shaking, like she's a little bit in consciousness for a while, but then she sort of falls back again, and man, it's really tense, really touch and go, and she sort of goes into a coma and appears as though she has died, and it's so emotional, like Millie Bobby Brown reacting to it, Lucas reacting to it when he's just clutching Max in his arms. I think this is the most emotional I got watching the episode, and one of the things they do is then it's clear then Elle is not going to let this go, then she obviously wants to save her friend. I've forgotten actually maybe the line of the episode just on a light thing. Then when Max sees Elle for the first time, like it's like, oh, is this real? Are you really here? And she says, it's real, I'm here. I piggybacked from a pizza dough freezer, and that's like, what? and that should be a t-shirt. I piggybacked from a pizza dough freezer. I absolutely love that line, and Max's reaction to it. But yeah, Elle's trying to bring Max back. She says, no, I'm not going to let this happen. And at first it crossed my mind because there's so much on this and possible people who could die, and it sort of crossed my mind that Elle could be a victim. So it did. I sort of wondered if they were going to do a thing where she was going to like maybe save Max and take her place, so she's taken instead. But she does this thing where she goes into the memories again, and it does remind you actually that there's been like a good arc really with those two characters together, because obviously when like Elle first laid her eyes on Max, she there was a little bit of jealousy because she thought there might be something with her and Mike, and they actually got off to a bit of a frosty start. Like Elle was quite cold with Max when they first met for the first time, but then season 3 that they actually started hanging out and being friends, and it's sort of gone from then, and they've actually been pretty close since then. So there's this beautiful thing where Elle uses those memories, the different memories of her and Max having fun and being close, and sort of uses it to try and bring her out, but it doesn't work. And we cut to like 2 days later, and it's sort of like a thing where the Mike group finally that they get back to Hawkins, and the town is just in chaos. You've got like very post-apocalyptic. They're reporting it on the news, and they're reporting it as like an earthquake because they can't really like figure out anything else. And we hear that there's already been 22 victims, but there may well be more. It shows no sign of really slowing down. But one of the big things about that is, of course, the media frenzy. They're still blaming Eddie, and they're still blaming this on a cult, because it does mention how this is like being put down to like a demon being called from a hell dimension. And once again, they're sort of blaming it on Eddie, and says he's disappeared, but that'll be no comfort to the victim or victims. We do get a nice sort of moment in like with Karen and with Ted being like the sort of doofus, but Karen knows what's going on. Karen's like, oh, okay, they're spreading more fear. That's all we need. So, but as I said, it's like 2 days later, and Mike and the gang like roll back into town, and so you do have this big reuniting with like the Nancy group. So Nancy, Jonathan reunite, and very sort of emotional, and they do all this different stuff because obviously these characters have been like separate all season. So Dustin gets to like see Will again and Mike for the first time in ages, so they like hug and embrace. And obviously Jonathan and Nancy sort of repair things, although they're a little bit still on shaky ground. There's still a bit of an edge between them, but yeah, we then find out that Max is still in the hospital. She's still in the coma, and this is really intriguing because we don't get an answer before the end of the episode, so it's left on a cliffhanger whether Max will survive or not. And one of the things they do is the Nell says she's not going to give in. Like you get the impression she's going to continue to like try and save Max. She's not going to give up on her. Like she tries another thing when they're in the hospital, like tries another mind meld type thing, and obviously all them visiting Max, and yeah, touch and go. Max is still in the coma. I mean, she might lose. We might lose her, but Elle obviously determined not to give up. And we see a few days later, or whenever it is, then she tries this thing with a bottle, and it's obviously flashing back to like in the hospital where she tried it to try and bring Max around, and it's still not working. But it's obviously this cliffhanger and something they're gonna address again in season 5. Now you gotta believe that they're gonna feature Max somehow, because she's not definitely killed off in this scene. Then they're gonna work her into the plot next season somehow. But moving on to things, and the stuff around the town I really like. I like how they sell this whole thing with this thing ripping through Hawkins. You have people leaving the town in droves. You have, which is a nice scene, like a shelter being set up for like victims or for people to stay at so that they're safer. And it's so nice. And like the Robin I think it's Robin, Steve, and Dustin all go to like volunteer there and help out. So that's really nice. And you get different things. You get like Dustin, like he comes across Eddie's like grandfather, uncle, I think it was, and he confirms to him that then Eddie's gone. Then he was with Eddie when it all happened. He gives him like Eddie's necklace, and just another like nice little scene where Dustin says what a hero Eddie was. He never stopped being himself, even at the time of danger, and he was so brave the way he continued to fight, and he was always Eddie. So that's a nice little tribute and a nice moment between those two, and just a great thing for like Dustin to say. And then there's a bit with Robin and Melissa, who's the girl she's got a crush on, who's like the Molly Ringwald type character, looks a lot like her anyway, I mentioned in the last review, and she says her boyfriend's like left her, which is perfect for Robin. But they just have a nice little scene where they're just like preparing like sandwiches for people at the shelter and start to get on quite well, and has a little bit of chemistry. And what makes it nicer is then Steve's obviously there. Steve looks over and sees them getting on and chatting and bit of a vibe, and he just like smiles and shakes his head. So it works well because he's there like watching them, and there's just different things going on. So they go to the shelter, and at the same time the Mike, Nancy, Jonathan, Argyle's there, I guess, because he doesn't have anywhere to go. Will as well. They sort of set up sticks and at like this cabin which has like been destroyed, almost like a cabin type house, and they like mend it and fix it. And once again, although they sort of like reunite and make up, there is still like an awkward vibe between Jonathan and Nancy. But and Nancy actually like says about this, and because she has this awkward line where she says, because he says, "I'm sorry I wasn't around," and she's like, "Actually, I'm glad you weren't." And he has this, he's like, "Oh, really?" And she's like, "Well, I just meant, I was glad you weren't in any danger." But then he mentioned Steve, which came across a bit like he was taking a pot shot at him, which, not great, Jonathan. But yeah, Nancy's like, "Actually, Steve has grown a lot." And I sort of like that. I like that as a meta type thing, because it literally has been that. Then Steve has grown a lot from the character in season 1, and that's been what's the really cool about his like elevation on the show, and how he has become this surprise like fan favourite. So there's something quite meta, I think, about Nancy saying to Jonathan, "Steve's actually grown a lot," because of course he has, as we known. And once again, that's setting things up where there could be more stancy action in season 5. I tell you what, I'll be very surprised if she ends up with Jonathan. I'll say that at this point, unless things are really going to turn around next season. But that's definitely one of the things to debate and discuss about what's actually going to happen and who's going to end up with who next season. So, I mean, who knows, that would have been such a big thing this season, but it clearly has been. And we get this nice little fake out where, like, I think it's Azel's, still trying to like do something to get Max back, where a van like pulls up and they see that it's a government style plan, and they're like, "Oh no, the government." And it's right before this actually, then Will mentions then, since he got back to Hawkins, he's actually had senses and has sensed them Vecna's still alive and that he's coming for them. And he says he won't stop. We need to kill him. And that's something which again is so perfect and so in continuity because of Will having those senses originally in season 2, following on from season 1. So it makes sense, and once again he would be affected, and then he could sense Vecna around. But then this thing pulls up and like, oh no, the government, what's going on? And then it cuts to 11 inside, and you get this fake out where someone comes through the door and 11 senses like react, so she seems to think it's someone bad, and then no, it's Hopper comes through the door, and they have this beautiful emotional like reunion, and they hug and kiss, and they sort of joke about like Hopper's hair and stuff like that. And then obviously Joyce is there as well, so she and 11 have like a really nice reunion, and you just have all this stuff. So it's once again a massive deal because they've been separated for so long, and been separated for, well, most of the season. Obviously in the case of like Hopper, it's a bigger moment for 11 because she says to him, I always believed you were still alive, you were still out there. But obviously for a long time she did think he was dead. So that's obviously a big moment. But also, like, since like the start of the season, she hasn't seen Joyce, and they've been separated. So much big emotion in the reunions, and because they've been kept apart for so long, that's why those scenes work so well. But then we get the hook for next season, and the confirmation that Vecna's still around, and obviously because of what's happened, then there is this new thing like sort of ripping through Hawkins, and it's something which obviously they couldn't stop. So you start to get the Stranger Things like synth music like sort of coming in, which is so good, and Will, like the hairs on the back of his neck sort of start standing up, and he turns around and he notices like a change in mood. He notices actually snow coming down, and like it cuts around the town. We see Holly at one point saying, "Mum, it's snowing," type thing, and I just love this atmosphere and the way the characters react to it, because they all start to turn. Will's first, but then they start to notice things happening, and it's this cool idea that then, you know, something like snow is being used as quite a ominous type thing, but they start being drawn towards it, and they wander through, and it's actually Elle who goes out in front, and she like picks up some flowers from the ground, and we see then the flowers are dying, and we see then off in the distance, like one half is like still normal, but then off in the distance you've got like hellfire and stuff, and things being like killed and stuff, and it sort of confirms that Vecna is still around and he still has plans. And we see just them looking, and as I said, Elle's out in the front, which is sort of perfect. I also really liked, Hopper and Joyce holding hands as they look on. That's really fitting, like the parents of the show, you know, they're just, yeah, they're like, okay, we're together, we're ready for this fight. But it's such the perfect ending, such the perfect hook. You've obviously got like a cliffhanger with Max, what's going to happen there, and then obviously there's going to be more with Vecna. Vecna is not done with this town, and obviously things have escalated now into the town further, so once again things being like amped up for the final season. So very satisfying season, really, very lots of emotional moments, lots of great dramatic action, very tense scenes, some really great storytelling, plenty of suspense, plenty of like interesting reveals. I've really loved how things have been tied into like the past season and how it's expanded the mythology. And as I said, even though it was 2 hours 20 minutes, this final episode of season 4 didn't really feel like it. It did go in pretty quick, and considering its length, and it was like really epic. So great stuff, and obviously it's really event TV. There are nitpicks to be had with the pacing at times and stuff. Like I still wouldn't necessarily say this is the best season, but overall I'm really happy with it, and really it reinvented itself in a very satisfying way, and I'm just so excited now. I'm excited to do a rewatch of the show, and I'm also really excited for season 5, the final season, and I hope it's not too long away, then we don't have to wait too long. But there you have it. That's Stranger Things season 4, the final episode, the Piggyback. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe. As always, I will be returning soon with more Stranger Things coverage. I do plan on doing like a predictions video for season 5, what we might have in store for the final season. But of course, let me know your thoughts. Share me out on social media. You can also support the channel at patreon.com/boardnow. But I'll be back soon. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.